Okay, let's take a look at the Salespersons Report and Analysis. It's problem 20-4B. Gabriel Horn Company employs 7 salespersons to sell and distribute its products throughout the state. And we have some table data that you can see in this area, or this area to the left of my mouse, for the year ending December 31st, 2008. And the first thing we're asked to do, reading to the left of my mouse, is prepare a table indicating contribution margin, variable cost of goods sold as a percent of sales, variable selling expense as a percent of sales, and contribution margin ratio by salesperson, and round those percents to a single digit. Okay, let's tackle that part next, and I'll slide down and see if I can get that in the screen here. Oh, excuse me a second. Clicked on the wrong item. See if I can get this to slide. Here we go. Okay, so we've got the information up front, and now in here I've put the table together, and I've also done some work ahead just to save time in the demo. All right, let me just leave it at this point, and we can sort of see Armstrong had $550,000 of sales. Slide up just a hair. $330 of variable cost and $110 of variable selling expenses. Now, recognize that both the number to this $330 and the $110, both of these numbers and all the numbers in these columns are variable costs. So if I slide up and I hit the F2 key, okay, now you can either look down here or look up here on the formula bar to see the same thing. What you see is I've entered the $550,000 of sales, less the $330,000 of the first variable cost and the $110 of the other variable cost. Right? The $330 was the variable cost of goods sold, the $110 was the variable selling. Okay, and then I've done the same thing for Brown as well. Okay, and on the others I think I just keyed in the numbers but didn't calculate them in Excel. But either way, there's our contribution margin. Then let me slide on down. Now that we have that, I've also jotted in the sales data. I think this is as far as we need to go, down to Severinsen. All right, so the sales data came from the table above, and that way we can compute variable cost as variable cost of goods sold as a percentage of sales. Okay, so the variable cost of goods sold above was equal to, what is that, 330,000 for both the first and the second case. So if I type in equal 330,000 and divide that by that number, I will get what it should be. Turn it to a percent and I get 60. We're supposed to take it to 1 decimal point. All right, I'll format that going down. And now we also had the exact same number for Brown, right? But if we slide up, we see that Davis was 271. So 271 divided by that number right there gets us 60.2%. Driscoll was 200. So 200 divided by that number. Then we can add Marsalis at 303,000 divided by that number. We can do Morrison at 265 divided by that number. And we can do Severinsen at 277,500 divided by his sales number. And that gets us our variable cost of goods sold as a percent of sales. Now we do the same process for variable selling percent. So here we had 110,000 divided by that number. And then we got to format it, and I'll just simply use my format painter to format all of those. We've got 20%. Then we have 119,900, the left of the mouse, divided by 550. Okay, now you've noticed I've gone ahead and completed the numbers for everyone else as well. Simply because I think you get the idea. We've gone through a number of these as how you would come up with those calculations. Then the last thing we need to do is compute the contribution margin ratio. And the contribution margin ratio, you take the contribution margin and divide it by sales. So I can do that again, format that as a percent, take it to 1 decimal place, and we can simply copy and paste downward and we will come up with the contribution margin. And that's the answer to part 1. Now, question 2, or question 1. Question 2 to the left of my mouse now says, which salesperson generated the highest contribution margin for the whole year? Okay, well, Morrison, where's Morrison? 680,000, right there. I'll sort of highlight that. Maybe I'll put that in yellow here. Okay, Morrison has the highest contribution margin ratio for the year, and there's 2 reasons for that. He has the smallest variable costs. Smallest variable cost of goods sold is a percent of sales, and our guess would be that that's the result of a favorable mix, right? He's selling products that result in a low variable cost of goods sold. Also, he has the lowest variable selling expense. So we see both in these areas here. I'll highlight that in maybe a different color here, that he's got the lowest cost as a percent of sales, and as a result, it's driving a high contribution margin. Okay. Number 3 says, briefly list factors other than contribution margin that be considered in evaluating the performance of the salesperson. All right, well, before we do that, I want to tackle one other thing. I want to tackle the why on number 2. And I think what I want to point out is that although he's got the lowest variable selling and the variable cost of goods sold, that could be the result of the fact that he's getting a lower commission, or there may be lower selling support costs. Those are areas we'd want to know more about. Okay, number 3, we briefly list factors other than contribution that would be considered in evaluating the performance of salespersons. One item you could consider is the rate of growth, right? What's the growth in sales been doing for the particular salesperson? And you would trend that. You would look at what's the sales this year versus prior years. We may be interested in the years of experience, the size of the sales territory, and then we may also want to compare the actual sales versus budget. All of these are valid methods of using quantitative ways of evaluating salesperson. Now, there's also qualitative factors like how do they get along with the team? Do people enjoy working with them? And I think those types of factors come into play as well. All right, that takes care of this problem, everyone. Thank you.